Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Cabinet meeting on the 11th of February. Item 1 is apologies. We only have apologies from a member of our senior officer leadership team, Sarah Reid. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from any members or officers? No, thank you. Item 3 is minutes of the previous meeting. Is Cabinet content that I sign the minutes as a true and accurate record of that meeting? Agreed. Thank you. Item 4, Chair's announcements. Just to say that this evening there's a strong financial emphasis on the papers that we're going to be debating. So you'll be hearing a lot from Councillor Malcolm Longley about this year's challenges, which we're confident of overcoming, but also, of course, the culmination of this year's budget setting process before that heads to full council next week for a debate by all members of the council. I'll just add that we have a long agenda this evening. We've got a reasonably limited number of speakers against each agenda item, but just to assist with the smooth running of the meeting, I'd be grateful if opposition members could keep their comments as concise as possible, as I know they generally do. That said, just to confirm that there's no urgent business this evening, so we can proceed on to item 6, which is a report from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It's the Support for Foster Carers in West Northamptonshire report. Do we have any member of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee with us this evening? No. Councillor Baker, are you presenting this?
Thank you, Chair. A task and finish panel was set up to look at how foster carers are supported in West Northamptonshire to provide effective care to local children in care. The task and finish panel carried out its work across 6 meetings during November 2023 to May 2024. The panel presented its report to the Children, Education and Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 19th of November 2024. The 7 key lines of inquiry are detailed on page 39 of the report, and following the work that was undertaken, 7 recommendations were made, which can be found on page 69, Appendix B. Appendix B also notes the response to the recommendations and any relevant updates. So it's quite a short paper, really. So the Cabinet are asked to consider the report and recommendations of the Children, Education and Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee and agree the Cabinet formal response to the Scrutiny Committee. The Children, Education and Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee will review the impact of this 6 months after the presentation of the report to Cabinet.
Just to clarify, Councillor Baker, the second recommendation is to agree to give our formal response at a subsequent Cabinet meeting, not tonight.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. We just have one speaker on this item, Councillor Purser.
Thank you. I'm often critical of scrutiny and its role in West Northampton. I think this is an example of a good piece of work that has been done, and it's a good example of what can be achieved with a scrutiny panel. So I welcome the report, and it looks as if there's a Cabinet response to the report. So I welcome that as well, that we're moving in the right lines. But what I'd say is reports are only reports. And what is important is that our foster carers really feel valued as partners in the task of looking after our children that we've got. So it's not about the reports, it's how they feel as a result of the action that we need to put in place. We need to make sure that they feel valued and listened to, that the bureaucracy supports them rather than is a burden to them, and that the training they get is relevant and excellent. So I suppose the 3 questions I've got are, have we completed the review of training? Because that seems pretty important as part of this process. Are they going to get the IT support that they need to make sure that they can link in with our teams as well as possible? And are we simplifying the payment system? Because that seems to be part of the bureaucratic nightmare that some of them face. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Purser. Before I hand back to Councillor Baker, I completely agree with you about the role of scrutiny in this process. I think it's an excellent piece of work. It gives us as an executive a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure the majority of the recommendations will be taken up. But what you see in the pack is somewhat confusingly a draft set of recommendations as per the recommendation. Our final response will come at a subsequent cabinet meeting. But back to you, Councillor Baker.
Just to assure Councillor Purser that the three things that he mentioned, training, IT support and payments, are already being worked on. They just haven't been finalised as yet, but will be for the future response.
Any further comments from members of the Cabinet? No, thank you very much. Therefore, the recommendations are at paragraph 3 as outlined by Councillor Baker. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Move forward then to the first of our finance papers this evening with Councillor Longley. This is the period 9 General Fund and Housing Revenue Account Capital Monitoring Report for this year.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not going to dwell terribly long on this, as we've had a few ups and downs over the year, but there's been this continues on. We've now got a very strong financial presence within here with the Order, and all of those who know Order from Daventry days will know how strong that is. So there will be changes afoot as the year goes on into next year. So, but the capital, this is really just an update. So there's not a great deal in here other than you haven't already seen. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll take any questions that are required. Thank you, Chair.
You may get questions from Councillors Holland, Delamere and Randall. So I'll call Keith to the table first of all.
So just noting, as in previous years, how much is drifted in the delivery. And I note on page 77, 5.3, all elements of proposed and active schemes are robustly challenged and monitored throughout the project lifetime. In some cases, will be subject to lessons learned review on completion. Based on these, the Council also intends to further strengthen this with a focus on major or complex construction projects that are more susceptible to changes in timescales, supply chains and material costs. Basically, my question is, how confident are we that the systems that we have and the resources that we have, staff and resources, are in place to make sure that we keep on track with these projects? And I also note that the accommodation for MPH on page 80 has been removed. What will happen to that accommodation for MPH?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Very good question, that, by the way. That's the essence of where we are on it. We've had some difficulties in some of the capital programs, and therefore we've sent our financial people in to see where we are, and that's in the process of being becoming clearer as we speak. We haven't got a final due, but if you know Order, then you and I both know that she's a terrier, and there are, and from that there will be consequences. Sorry, what was the other question, Keith?
The MPH accommodation.
The MPH accommodation. Sorry, I'll pick up on that, Keith. Come back to you. Hang on, I've had a vote from my learned friend next to me. Knows more about it than I do.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is part of the development budget that was looked after by MPH. So all of that's being reviewed at the moment. It's at the moment it's paused, and we're considering the best steps forward for that part of it. So more detail will follow on that particular point.
Councillor Randall.
My comments into the forward plan.
Yeah, of course. You'll need a microphone because we're live streaming.
No. Nobody, you won't be able to be seen now. I don't know where the camera is.
Obviously, Daisy.
The
It was only a, yes, yeah, thanks. Yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of these projects that are, you know, that have slipped over. And I just wondered when, you know, are they going to be deliverable or not? And on page 80, there was the High March refurbishment, which I'm sure only come to Cabinet in about December time. And that's no longer feasible. So what's going to happen to that area? Thank you.
As in all projects, Wendy, then deliverable, yes, they are. And the question is what price? So as always on these things, and that's where we are on these couple of projects. And that's exactly what we're looking at the moment. And we will get to resolve a way forward. And if the numbers add up, we'll do it. If they won't, we won't.
Chair,
one
if I
officer.
Thank you. If I could just add, Chair, that I think there is quite a high level of slippage on the capital programme, and I think we recognise that. We're taking steps to try and address that, to try and make sure that we manage projects more closely, to try and make sure that we reduce the level of slippage going forward. We had a dedicated session on management of the capital programme with ELT yesterday, and that message is going out through the organisation. So it's an area we are aware of and an area we're looking to improve on.
Thank you. Any further comments from Councillor Longley or any other member of the Cabinet? No, thank you. The recommendations are paragraph 3 of the report. Is Cabinet content to approve those? Agreed. Thank you. Item 8, still with Councillor Longley. This is the revenue monitoring report for period 9 of this current financial year.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The best way to go through this report, as always, as I always do, is thanks. Best way to go through this report, as I always do, is to look at the table 1. This gives the picture. What we're trying to do here is draw an assessment of the year end. Now, for those of you that have studied this, it'll become pretty clear to you quickly that we're forecasting a further £1 million overspend at this year end at this point in time. That's at period 9. So at the end of the 3rd quarter, that's overwhelmingly come from the Children's Trust. Now, we've taken a view on this. As always, we deliberate at great lengths of what we think the year end will end up as. And so what we've done here is we've come to the conclusion that we're going to put a slightly pessimistic view because we're still expecting bad news and we'd be surprised if we don't get it. Now, having said that, we're then sort of forecasting it in. Now, we have other items that we have within our area of expertise that we can modify that as the quarter goes on. But we don't want to do that because we want to see where we are so we can take proper stock. Now, typically in the 4th quarter of any operation, officers, being officers as they are, wonderful people, usually maintain a little bit of a slush fund just to make sure that things go wrong, and that's good. That's good management. No problem with that at all. Now, if they've done that, then these amounts tend to come out in the 4th quarter. So we'd expect a bit of that. You see, actually, if you look at the adults. Stuart's given us a goodbye present there a little bit, and that's what's happening there. And I would expect to see that. So you would expect to see a better result, and I'd be very disappointed if we didn't get very close to balance or balance itself. However, at this point in time, I'd want to see what Children's come through with first, and that'll be the next month or two. We'll know the story. In fact, we've got a very substantial meeting in the morning, first thing, where we will get a better view. So our current view is 5 million. We'll see where that goes. And if you look at the various loans in movement since P7, you'll see that it's broadly in line, with the exception of the Children's Trust. That's the dominant feature, and has been all year, in fact, that and the adult social care. So I don't intend to go through any of the great detail. What I would say is that on the 20th, as you'll all be well aware, we got full council, and I will give a full update on the year-end outlook, section by section, as I always do, always have done, and what we see for next year and the on the whys and wherefores. So, but that's the broad view. I'll await questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. Councillors Holland-Delamere Mayor and Randall on this item.
So basically, we seem to be seeing the consistent challenges in the budget. So I recognise how challenging it is. I mean, how confident are we that we will see this sort of overspend reduced before December, or do you still think we will be roughly on the 5 million by the end?
I've been doing this budget now. I think I said worked out about 8 years now, and the one word I have absolutely never used, and that's confident. If only. And the reason I don't use that, amongst any other reason, I'll tell you the story, because my predecessor kept saying to the opposition, and he's confident, and he banged the table, and then we had a 114. So I never used the word confident. Keith, you give it your best shot, you know, and that's a prudent, we think, approach to the year end as we stand now. Having said that, every time we've had a meeting, and any of the directors sit at a meeting, and Martin comes in, and they also, and then Martin then gives the view on what the latest was from the Children's Trust, and they all go, oh God, the eyes roll up, and it's very hard on them, because the situation is that broadly they're in pretty good order, and they're well managed. So, but this is beyond our control. I argued with the commissioners at the time, daft idea. You've got responsibility without control. We've got no control over this, but we've got the darn responsibility. Fundamental management error, but that's what we've got. So we live with it. And thanks to Martin, he puts contingencies and goodness knows what away, expecting this situation to develop. So confident? No. We'll see. We'll see. And I'll give you a pretty precise view on the 20th. Does that help?
Councillor Randall.
Thank you, Chair. It does look a bit grim, and it seems to be the same old every year, actually. So for me, I want to know what we're going to do how are we going to do things differently? Because we can't keep having this every year, can we? These overspends. And, you know, you say about the children's budget, but adult social care overspend is more. And we have a separate line in our council tax for adult social care. So, you know, people are saying to me, you know, well, why? You know, why are we spending more and more and more? And obviously, I understand that obviously we're funding more, and costs for care homes are going up and up and up. But what are we going to do differently? How are we going to change things to make it keep going in the same direction?
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely right. I've got no problem with that. Let's see how we've handled it the last 3 years and this year as well, and how I'm going to propose we handle it next year. And it's all about, you've heard me bang on about this often enough already, I'm sure, productivity. And if you can only offset this by productivity programs, and we've had a lot of them. We do them every year, and it's hard going, you know. And we're battling these overspends, and every time it's only productivity that brings that balance into account. And we've got productivity programs in next year. If they don't happen, we'll be overspent. If they do happen, we hopefully will balance the books. And that's been the situation these last 4 years. And as far as I can see, whilst we've got children's as they are and adults, these demand, if it carries on going up, then that will remain the situation. So productivity is the key. I'll cite you a couple of examples, as you'll be well aware of them, and that's the buying the houses. You know, trying to duck out of the care home situation where the prices are going up. Are they overcharging? You all have a view on that. So we're doing it ourselves. It's those sort of things, and we've got to do more and more and more of them. And you've got a team in here that's been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years. The directors are all sick to death of me saying it, probably. But I'm going to say it again. So that's the answer.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. Councillor McCord, who's the chairman of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Adam. Just one thing though, Wendy, I don't think you can actually say adult social care is more overspent than the Children's Trust, because bearing in mind we're only picking up roughly half of the Children's Trust overspend. So you really need to almost double that number to approximately 12 million and then compare it to the 10 or the 9.5 for adult social care, because we're picking up all of the in-house overspend on that. Sorry to be pedantic on these matters. So I think you were touching on what I was going to say then, Malcolm, on the Children's Trust overspend, because what's concerning me at the moment is that the budget that you'll be coming onto next doesn't actually fix this year's overspend. It's less than that. So my concern, and I've been through this from Martin, so I know the answer, but nonetheless, it is a concern that we're going into it expecting a big savings to come out of them next year, which hitherto they haven't delivered on. So it builds a risk into your budget on the next item, but it is something that we need to be, that we certainly need to be thinking about. And I certainly think, again, it should be something where scrutiny hasn't looked too much into Children's Trust for a while, and it's probably now time that it comes back into view. And just one other thing, when you do get to year end, now the past couple of years, we have magically capitalised more or less what the overspend was. So shall I make a prediction now that we'll be capitalising about 4 million quid? It'll be 5. But how much are you forecasting that you think you'll be able to capitalise and then magically say, voila, we've balanced the books?
Two things there, Ian. The first thing is, you're quite right about the doubling spend, not quite double, but near enough. The other factor that is worth noting, if we're going on this, is that the adults is 145 and children's is near enough to 100. So you've got those balances. They're more or less about the same when you get that. As regarding capitalised, yeah, there will be a little bit of capitalised. It won't be 5, it won't be 4. Unfortunately, I wish it was. It'll be 1.5, maybe 2. You know, that sort of range. We'll see. But I think we got 1 or 2 other ideas as well, as you would expect.
Thank you very much. I'm sure somebody once said something about fix social care and you'll fix the council finances, but I forget who. I know that Councillor Golby and the Chief Executive wish to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I was just going to make a comment on Wendy's challenge around adult social care and the budget, and I would just refer members and colleagues back to the budget scrutiny session we had just a couple of weeks ago, and the presentation from the director, which when he talked about a survey from ADAS, which is the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services, where over 80% of all authorities nationally are predicting they're going to be overspending on adult social care. So it's not just us, it's a national issue, and the reasons are contained in the budget monitoring report. However, I just remind everybody also, and in my opinion, we've got a brilliant team here and a great set of assistant directors that are right on their game in terms of all the spends, challenging the spends, and making sure we're being as efficient as we possibly can. And we've also got some good measures coming in over the next few weeks. Indeed, the go live of the new care system, is that happening? yesterday, this week, there we go, that should make a massive difference to how we use data, and we're able to predict and analyse all the spend patterns moving forward. Thank you.
Chief Executive.
Thank you. Just, I suppose, a couple of comments about, you know, this the same old, same old. I'm sure it feels like that to the public and to members too. And it's one of those unfortunate things that sometimes the numbers look the same, but actually the causes are very different. This year in adults, we've had a different sort of year in a sense. And I think the key is, do we understand why, and then what do we do about it? We, again, suffered from the overhang of the previous winter's extra costs. So we started the year, and I know that Martin as 151 would acknowledge this, already having set a budget, knowing the winter had cost us several millions pounds more than we expected. And try as we might to predict what, you know, the demand, it seems to always exceed that at the moment in a bad winter. So that's one challenge. The other two challenges in adults, which we've talked about, I know, are the withdrawal just generally across the piece of CHC funding by health. And that is a national problem. It's one I've joined loads of calls about, because they're under pressure to reduce deficits. And in so doing so, of course, they reduce costs. The costs come to us. It actually is quite a cyclical thing, because then obviously costs come back in terms of people escalating. So it's really a national issue that we're talking to Treasury about and everybody about. But CHC is one. The other one, which again I've talked to you about, is assets below. So we saw an exceptional amount of people go below the thresholds. So twice as many as normal ran out of money. And again, that's a national trend. Now, that may be because care's got more expensive, that they're running out of money first, but that's the reality. And so what we're seeing is far more people than we ever predicted then coming to us for care. And again, we'll adjust that for next year. We'll try to deal with the CHC for next year. On the Children's Trust thing, I think just to make a comment on two things, really. So one of the biggest reasons for their extra overspend in this last period is property related. So as councillors hopefully know, we're doing a huge amount to create new properties to bring stuff in-house from our own assets, as of the North, to try and make sure we reduce those costs of care. Two of them slipped, two of the projects slipped, and that cost about 1.3 million in lost savings. The actual slippage was out of our control because we were waiting for CQC to deregister from an adult situation to a children's home. I think, though, we should have spotted earlier that that had slipped and then dealt with it and flagged it. It wouldn't have changed the outcome in terms of savings, but getting much more robust, which we have done going into next year about the savings on properties and what's happening, is absolutely in place now. So we've got all the early warning signs. And that is the key to next year. So Ian's point about what's the challenge next year for the Children's Trust is we have to deliver on those properties. Sad reality, just as a final comment, I think I've said before, most children who come into care, they're either, you know, under 1 and it's neglect, under 5 and neglect, very sadly. The huge majority of them are over 14. And it's breakdowns of families, you know, struggling to place, expensive placements, behavioural challenge. We have to do the property stuff right. I think the Children's Finance Director said the other day, if actually we were similar to other authorities in over 17 accommodation, we'd spend 3.5 million less a year, because we've got so many more children funded by the Children in Accommodation. So that is one of our big focuses for next year in their saving, which should absolutely start to bring the gap down. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any final Councillor Baker.
I just wanted to say, and not to go back over the past at all, but we do know that one of the long-term measures that we're putting in place is the early help side of our children's work. And very happily to say that our first hub will be opening at the end of March, where we're going to be able to do a lot of work with our children at various stages of their lives, school readiness, working with families with teenagers, etc. We're going to be 0 to 19 and 25 for those with special needs and disabilities. All sorts of things going in there. As you can see, if you look over, the lady's in there painting. Well, she was earlier. She's probably gone home now. So I think it's going to be a really nice place. There's all sorts of services going in there, and that will be the key to actually stopping some of these children going into care. It's long term, but that's what we have to think of. But I just want to sort of say that when we took over as West Northants Council, our children's services were probably very poor as far as the whole country was concerned. I'm not going to say the whole word, but we all know where we were. And now with the DIP visits that we get from the Department of Education, we are really on a good journey now to be at a very improved service. So that is really good news as well, that we're doing a much better service for our children.
Thank you very much. Last call for any comments or questions? Thank you. Recommendations, as always, at paragraph 3 of the report. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We move on then to item 9, which is the final budget and medium-term financial plan for 25-26. It says final budget because this is, of course, the administration's final budget before it heads off to full council for debate next week. We presented the draft budget to Cabinet in December. Since then, it's been out for a public consultation, but at the council meeting next week, opposition groups will have the opportunity to put forward either alternative budgets or amendments to this final budget presented by the administration. So I'll hand over now to Councillor Longley for his introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Right, well, I think that the key point to this is I'll touch on the key points. I don't intend to go into a lot of the detail because I will be doing that on the 20th. But if anybody has any detailed points they wish clarifying, then just email myself or Martin, and we will deal with them. The essential point here is that this isn't very much different from the draft plan that you all saw before Christmas. And in fact, there's been the settlement's been a bit improved, so it's actually gone in the right direction, which is a pleasure, but not huge, but it's in the right direction. Now, a lot of the people around this room here today, certainly all the directors have been deeply involved in it, and we've been at this for some months now, so they're all very familiar with it, as indeed are the Cabinet. So the key point here is this is a balanced budget. There's the points made by Ian that is quite correct. If we don't hit the productivity, we've got a difficulty. It's the key to it, always has been, with the situation we're faced with. Now, we've got some contingencies in there. Some of the extra money we put in contingency, so we've got a good number there. But we don't want to use that. I mean, that means it's not spent on other items if there's overspend. So it's a situation we're going into. We think we've got a good story here. It's as good as we can put together, and I believe that we'll end up with another balanced budget. The budget's balanced. I've always said to the people we're working with is writing a balanced budget is the easy bit. Delivering it's a little bit more tricky, but that's what we fully intend to do. So I think that's really the key point, other than the detail itself, Chair. There's a very substantial capital proposals in this budget, and that's all about productivity again. It's just the same story. There's nothing new there. And anybody that wants to get involved in the capital side of it, you all see the capital and assets board that meets on a regular basis, has done for some years now. It's been very successful, we think. And all the capital, every single item goes through in the greatest of detail. So I think that's really about the size of it. I don't intend to go into the detail that I'm going to cover again in a week or two's time, Chair. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. We've got 4 speakers on this item. Councillors McCord, Squires, Holland-Delamere and Randall. So invite you to the table, Ian.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. I'm really wanting to speak now on to Cabinet around the budget scrutiny that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee undertook. And where we're at. So the report from Overview and Scrutiny begins on page 341 of the pack. But firstly, I want to place on record my thanks to all those who helped in the scrutiny process, particularly Martin and all the finance team who've pulled this together. I know it's a lot of effort. And I also want to thank Malcolm and all the portfolio holders who helped with scrutiny, and the staff members, directors who came along. Now, I can't name them all, but I did send an email, I think, to 45 people after we did the Zoom call. So I would love to do a lot more, but as you can just see from that, just the limited amount of work we did manage to do, it is quite resource intensive, and I'm grateful to everybody for their help. So our aim was to make recommendations to Cabinet. I'm not sure the committee members got the memo, because we ended up making more recommendations to the committee itself as to other areas that it might want to look at. But we did look at about 4 areas: innovation, and particularly the use of artificial intelligence, adult social care, and especially forecasting, HRA, budget adequacy, and especially in relation to any costs that might have come out from the issues that surfaced last year, and the cost of sustainability and net zero. So on innovation, the draft budget had about 5 million cash efficiency gain. And as a result of the work of both the committee and the finance department in revalidating those assumptions, I think Martin calls it budget robustness process, that 5 million did look a bit shaky. The final budget, that does not contain that 5 million, and the committee are recommending, and I say it's happened, so that has been taken out. Now, I would describe that as a near miss. In other industries, near misses are looked at as seriously as accidents to find the lessons to be learned. And we got a bit lucky with the final settlement that the ups and downs meant that the 5 million has been replaced with a similar amount. So there's been no harm done, but there could have been a real issue here. So I'm still unsure how it managed to get into the draft, but nonetheless, we should look at that in future. Now, most of the potential for saving is around the deployment of artificial intelligence. Cabinet will be aware that a series of pilots are underway, and the committee welcomed all of those initiatives, and we want to see a lot more use of that sort of technology, and we do acknowledge that there were insufficient data to put a savings figure into the budget, but we don't want that interpreted as, well, we tried AI and it doesn't work. And at the same time, we're not recommending that the pilots or the existing program is in any way stopped. We really do want to see it. And we do feel, and I'm certainly personally, I feel, and it is in the report, that there should be something in there, and particularly for the last quarter of the incoming financial year, which is more or less 12 months from now, there should be some savings, real savings. Now, we as a committee see a lot of potential for cash savings, cost avoidance, and just massive productivity, possibly negating the need to bring in more people in order to do, with the help of AI, one person can do what might take 3-4 people to do now. And there are various areas where that wouldn't necessarily mean getting rid of people, but it would certainly mean if one person can do 3 of something in a week, they might be able to do 8 or 9 in the same week. But you've still only, from a cost point of view, got that one person involved. So we certainly right behind all of that and want to keep it going. And the committee will probably keep a watching brief on that going forward. On adult social care, we had a concern around overspend and this sort of forecasting loop of we're overspent, we correct the budget, and next year we're overspent, we correct the budget. Were we doing something in forecasting? Now, the working group that looked at it were satisfied that we do as good a job on the forecasting as it's possible to do. It is ultimately guesswork, albeit informed guesswork, but that's what it is. And if there are any tools like AI that can help us predict that with a bit more accuracy, we would welcome it. And as you've said, and you mentioned it earlier, you've heard me say often enough, fix care. I need to fix anything in local government. So it is the big area for us and for everybody that has care, which after reorganisation will be every council everywhere. So our recommendation is that we continue to lobby anyone who will give us a hearing that urgently needs reform of the care settlement and the health, as Anna was pointing to as well, that health council interface, shuffling people off between one to the other, playing ping pong with them doesn't really achieve very much. On the HRA budget, the committee was assured that the budget appeared to be adequate, and that our fair concern that the work might have come up with a Pandora's box of unplanned remedial work isn't there, thank goodness. But there were some specific concerns that have been mentioned in the report around cladding, skill shortages, and of course the effects of the national insurance rise. And then on net zero, now just first off, this was not my idea, it was other members of the committee, and the report and the committee work is not my personal view on this policy, which I think is well known, but I'm here to report the work of the committee. The question that we wanted answered was, does WNC have sufficient budget, especially capital, to do what is necessary to achieve the WNC policy aim of carbon net zero by 2030. So I think the answer the committee came up with is probably not, but it's hard to tell. WNC doesn't have a specific capital budget with a label on it that says net zero 2030. There are small discrete pots of funding in various departments that can be obtained or grant and match funded, which we do seem to avail of. There is a lot of cross-cutting work, but getting data is difficult, and these initiatives and projects appear to lack a strategic overview. And the committee is recommending the Cabinet do give this a strategic overview and a plan with all the costs set out so we can easily see if the Council is on track or not. Those were the main areas of work the committee focused on. The reports and our work over the next few meetings are available. Should any member wish to see them, there's a lot of detail. And I also want to thank particularly Richard and Tracy and the team who produced minutes at breakneck speed, running to quite a few thousand words. So that was all we had. There's just one point as well I touched on briefly is the NI rise. I think the budget has got a huge risk. We probably need to think about possibly even adding this onto the risk register around what this new employer's NI is going to mean for us. Because the situation where we're allegedly compensated for a directly employed, say, person working out of the depot at Toaster emptying bins because they're an employee of this council, but the same person working out of the depot in Northampton or Daventry who's an employee of Veolia or Norse isn't directly sort of compensated is a bit is a big risk. And I also think there's going to be a huge risk in all of our providers and our supply chain, particularly on the care side again, that there will be people seeing those costs coming through and then coming here to do it. So I do think we need to be really careful about how we proceed and what we're going to be doing, because I personally see that as a huge concern and risk that there will be costs that we're going to be asked to look at or contribute to, over which we have very little control. And the amount coming in is just about covering our own direct cost, maybe a little bit the other way, but not giving an awful lot more. And it is also bonkers that something like the Children's Trust doesn't fall within that remit because it's a trust and an arm's length organisation, but it's only got one customer. So to say it's not actually public sector is a little bit of a tautology in my view, but that's all I have to say. I might say a bit more next week at council, who knows. But if anybody wants any questions on what scrutiny have done, I want to restrict it very much to what the view of scrutiny has been. I'm more than willing to take them on.
Oh, thank you, Ian. Interesting as always. Thank you. Yeah, the AI one's an interesting one. We would also expect something to happen last quarter, last half year, who knows? That's the problem. We were very disappointed that we put £500,000 up for the pilots, as you probably remember. And we're getting results coming through, but not sufficient to give us confidence to put a solid number in for the final. And so therefore we've done what we've done. We've done what we believe to be correct on that, but we'll see where it goes. You know, it's anything that does comes a bonus, and you'd expect something to come, quite right. But let's see what happens. Now, interesting on the PVs, I thought that was quite an interesting one, the net zero by 2030. I would tell you this now, I've looked at this, obviously, and taken the same view you did. Very skeptical to begin with, and I went through this, the net zero by 30, and if we do the PVs that are in the programme, we should clearly hit that with offsets and things of that nature and all the tricks that go with that. We'll hit it. If we don't do the PVs, we won't. That's my view. Now, the question then becomes how you fund it. And no, we wouldn't want to put all that cash out. It'll be a partnership situation. So it'll depend on what deals we can come up with to deliver that situation. And if we come up with the right deals, they've got to be financially competent deals, obviously, otherwise we don't want to do them in the first place. But if they are competent and we do them, and we get the PVs in, we'll hit the number. If we don't, we won't. That's
Yeah, I
the-
think what the committee would like to see,
Mm.
and I think that would go for both those who think this is a good policy and one to be aimed for, and those of us who think it's not such a good policy and we shouldn't waste too much time on it, is to have that line in the budget as a specific, this is our pot for which we're going to spend on net zero, the biggest part of it being the photovoltaic. thing.
It's all and everything.
Like we've put some in, but it's rather, I think what we're saying is it's rather difficult unless you go and pick all these bits
Yeah,
out
so you can't get
to,
in,
to
yeah.
actually say, there's what we're spending on achieving this. That's what we would like to see, I think. And I think that goes for the likes of Jonathan, who's at the
Sure.
other end of the argument than I would be personally. But I think that's what the committee wants to see.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, thanks, Ian. We'll pick that up.
Councillor Squires.
Chair, just on one part of it, Appendix D, medium-term funding strategy. When I looked at the table on page 209, I did get a bit of a fright. £57.5 million shortfall by 29/30. I read the report. I see we're not benefiting from the recovery grant. We're too wealthy. Again, that surprised me. Perhaps we ought to get our MPs to come and have a look at Northampton and some of the poor rural areas. Just some points I picked up. One on the assumptions, you've got 2% inflation. I'm sure Bank of England are forecasting 3.7 this year. And also saw the council tax has been assumed at 4.99% per annum over the next 5 years. So effectively, we're baking in these higher than inflation increases over the length of the next council. I read the mitigations and how we're going to cover the gap. I was going to say how confident we are of this, but I'll say how sure are we of achieving this? Surely this is going to mean either cuts will have to be made or we're going to eat into the reserve over the next 4 years of the council.
Thanks, Carl. Very interesting observations. Yeah. When I first kicked off this job, some little time ago, I made a point of looking to the borrowings, and it's a very important thing to get right. You get that wrong, you can get yourself in deep trouble, as we all know. And as a consequence, I follow that probably closer than anything else. Well, the revenue budget, obviously, but also next comes the borrowings. And I follow the Treasury report. You might have heard me say it. It's my favourite report. Sad, isn't it? But there it is. I've not got a particular problem on the borrowings because, it's a situation whereby we're using the capital as it's structured in the Capital and Assets Board, and it's very, very clear on what we do there. If it's statutory, we've got no choice in the matter. Somebody else is funding it, that's fine. And then third, if it's productivity and comes to the bottom line, then we'll do it. And then pretty much that takes the capital. And so if it's not got productivity, by and large, it's unlikely to get done unless somebody else is funding it. And so we watch it very closely. On my watch, that borrowing won't get out of control. The 4.99, I'd love to make it more. Business, pricing is everything. 4.99, what else would you put in there at this point in time? And I agree with you, the inflation, it's the Bank of England. Is it going to come down? Might get 3.25 this year, maybe, that sort of range. But next year, I don't know, inflation takes off again, and I could do that. Who knows? So, you're making a pitch each time. And but my experience of budgeting is that I never really take seriously years 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's a bit like this. So, but this year you can take that seriously, and next year, okay, we'll see. But I would never let borrowing get out of control.
All right, thank you. Just we're emphasising a lot on productivity. My previous role, I was in charge of trying to do productivity. All I'll say is it's a lot harder than you think. You need to stop things. You need to stop things happening earlier on in the process, and that's all I'll say. Thank you very much.
Any good ideas? Gratefully received.
Thank you. Just on the council tax point and the midterm financial strategy, 4.99% is obviously a projection. We don't know what's going to happen with inflation over the course of that time. Prime example is that when we set a council tax rise of 4.99% last year, inflation was about 10% at the time. So we just, when we set the draft budget, certainly in December of that year, so we just don't know what's going to happen with inflation. I would never want council tax to rise above that in this area. We've seen other councils in the country, Windsor and Maidenhead, for example, Lib Dem Council, they applied for a 25% increase in council tax. They got 9% from the government. Other councils elsewhere, 10%, 9%, 8%. We didn't apply for an extraordinary council tax rise, and I would never want to see that happen on my watch. We know the effect of council tax rises on our residents, but as well as wanting fundamentally low taxes, we also have to ensure that we have sound money at the council and that we have the money to run the services that we need to provide to our residents. On that note, Councillor Holland-Delamere doesn't want to speak, so I'll hand over to Councillor Randall. He's also declined, thank you. Any further points from Councillor Longley? Other members of the Cabinet? No, thank you. Recommendations are, as always, at paragraph 3 of the report. Are we all agreed? Agreed, thank you. We move on then, but only in one sense, because we're still with Councillor Longley. Item 10 is the HRA budget for the next financial year.
Thanks for the stuff here, Chair. Bear with me. Well, this is building on the comments I made earlier, because I think we're going to see a fair bit of change here, and we've also got to go back on the borrowing. Carl's point, actually, it was an interesting one here. What the current borrowing roughly in WNC is around £500 million, which is fairly average for a council our size, but you then look a bit closer than that, and quarter of a billion, 250 rough figures, not quite exact, but of that is WNC, and 250 very roughly is the HRA. Now, it wasn't very long ago when this council started, WNC, we took over the HRA, and I'd never seen it before. But the one thing that did strike me quite strongly was that borrowing was going up in the HRA at 40 to 50 million a year. And so we put a stop to that and put it on a more robust footing. So it is now on a robust footing. That will mean it won't rise anything like it has in the past. So we've got a bit of a conundrum coming up with the HRA, in that we've had a couple of shocks, as Wendy pointed out, on a few of the projects, and we've got one of our best people in there looking at the finances coming out, and I think there'll be a bit of a realignment, and probably in the new council, because it's coming to close. So I'm not going to say overly much on this, because it's the report itself is very straightforward. I think what one has to think about is where it's going to go in the coming year. And I think that might prove to be a little different. So, Chair, if with respect, I'd like to leave it at that for the moment, unless there are any particular questions anybody wants to ask me.
Councillor Purser may have some questions for you.
Well, Malcolm, you may think it's straightforward. it seems to me a very complex area, actually, and I'd want to put on record it's a very good paper that explains quite a lot of seems to me very difficult issues. Really, I can almost understand some of it at least, but so I and we did look at it at scrutiny and came up with some kind of issues and challenges, because I think it is really quite difficult certainly the last year has been difficult because of the impact of the fire safety reports and the buildings conditions report. And I suppose the question is really that might well need to reschedule the kind of priorities that the capital spend. And I suppose the question is, how will we, I think it's very important that scrutiny looks at what are those priorities and are they the right priorities, really? Because it seems to me there needs to be quite a major readjustment about what are the real priorities not in the new housing bit, but in the what I call the capital maintenance, and I'm sure that's the wrong phrase really, but the kind of capital that needs to go into our housing stock, then making sure that we're spending it in the right areas. And it seems to me that's quite a difficult thing to turn that juggernaut round to really respond to the conditions survey that we've had done. So that's one point. I suppose the second thing is about the continuing, we've got into some really bad habits about our new housing developments getting delayed. And it's how do we get those onto a plan where we're actually we set ourselves, well, you, the Cabinet, set a target of 500 new social houses during the lifetime of this council. And we're well adrift from that. So really, we've got to have a new way of planning the scheduling of our housing and making sure we actually deliver against that schedule, and recognise there are all sorts of difficulties and delays that happen, but we've got to somehow, there needs to be a greater sense of urgency about really delivering, because it has knock-on back to the costs of our temporary housing thing, which is one of our bad revenue pressures on us. So how do we do that? And I'm just looking at the Castle Street development, which to those of us driving past, it looks ready for people to move in, but people haven't. What's the delay? Why? It was meant to be done at the end of last year. So really, surely, and that will be having revenue consequences for us. So I suppose. So that's one kind of issue, and I suppose the second thing is we now have our affordable homes delivery plan. I think that's the right phrase, isn't it? How well integrated is our budget with that plan? Are those two really linked together? So those are my questions on that.
Thank you, Councillor Purser. I think you answered your own question in a way there about what our plan is for housing, and then you came back to the affordable housing delivery plans. So the alignment on budgets and what have you, I'll leave to the finance experts at the front here.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I think probably the best way to answer two questions really. The first is that the capital allocations, right? Oh, there you are. Allocations. Probably the best way to rather than go through it is to guide you to page 418, where you've got that clear. You've got 15, 16 million on the sort of subjects you spoke about, and just under 40 million on new build. But and as always, that is the dilemma with this. What do you do? What do you spend the money on? Because we've spoken about borrowing. We don't want to go there if we can avoid it, for obvious reasons. And so as a consequence, we've got to run this effectively a business on its own merits, and that's proven to be difficult to do so far. But that will come out in the wash, I'm pretty sure. You did speak about scrutiny being involved, and that's a good idea. Always welcome on a subject like this. It's always good to have other inputs into it that are vested interest. So I think that's a good thing. All good ideas gratefully received. And I think this is very much, I think I'll finish on the spot to say this is very much a work in progress, because that's what it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Longley.
Get a view from Jane, yeah.
So the Director for Communities and Opportunities.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to answer on a couple of things. So the housing delivery plan covers much wider than our own delivery as a council. So one of the elements of that we put together is we have the new housing delivery board starting in March, which brings together developers, RPs, architects, and lots of people in the area who can partner with us to deliver that affordable housing programme and make sure that we've got it much wider than what we're delivering as well. The other element with regards to the capital figures and housing development, as you know, there'll be a review and there'll be some papers coming in June to discuss the sites that we took over from MPH, and we just still need to do some work on those figures. So then we'll know what the further programme is, but that isn't delaying any progress on this. We're in discussions with a lot of developers and RPs about what work we can do with them. We're also looking at other sites such as Darlington, etc., which has been launched to the wider market to take a look at as well. So there is a number of active plans in place while we do that other work.
Just for the non-council people watching, RPs is registered providers or housing associations. So just make that clarification. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Just to provide you with reassurance on the question about the stock condition surveys. So as I think you know, we're doing a weekly compliance meeting where we're going through every action that's come out of those. And all the health and safety checks that we've done and everything else. And that's building up then obviously a picture of all the different repairs by priority. As you, I think, also know, we've put one of our assistant 151s, deputy 151s into MPH to work with them. And she is taking all of that action plan and building it into the budget with MPH. So everything that's in there at the moment in terms of remedial actions and things that we've done already in the budget. And then they've planned for a kind of 25% rolling stock condition survey with appropriate costs that would then come out of that based on what we know. So they've absolutely accounted for what we need to do. So that wouldn't be an extra cost and an extra pressure. Obviously, you could risk finding new things, but I think we're in a much better place in terms of tracking that cost.
Thank you very much. Any final comments, Councillor Longley?
No, I think I said it. All work in progress, Chair.
Thank you very much. Direct members' attention to the recommendations. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 11 is with Councillor Baker. It's admissions arrangements for community and voluntary controlled West Northamptonshire schools for 2026 intakes.
Thank you very much. Normally, this is something that we legally have to bring every year. Normally, I bring it and there aren't any changes, but this year we have got a couple of minor changes to make to take into account at the bottom of this piece that I'm just going to read to you now. Local authorities must determine and publish the admission arrangements for all community and voluntary controlled schools annually to ensure compliance with the School Admissions Code 2021. The reductions in pupil allocated numbers are to ensure that schools are supported when facing falling pupil numbers. This is due to a drop in the primary school population, due to a drop, as we know, in the birth rate. A consultation was carried out in line with the School Admissions Code between 11th of November 24 and 31st of December 24. We only had one response about changes required, and that which was received was in relation to the criterion for children of staff, which you can see we're doing a change. In a change from last year's admission arrangements, the Council is proposing the addition of a new criterion for children of staff, and this will promote the ability of schools to attract and retain high-quality teaching staff as permitted by the School's Admission Code. So it's recommended that Cabinet approve the reduction in PAN for Delaprey Primary School and Croughton All Saints Church of England Primary School, the revised criteria for Brackley Junior School, the addition of the criterion to give some priority to children of staff, approve the overall admission arrangements as detailed within Appendix A. So that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Two speakers on this, Councillors Harris and Randall. Pass from Councillor Harris. Councillor
No,
Randall.
Yeah, I was only going to say, is there a concern that any of these schools will become unviable if numbers continue to fall?
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Baker.
Yes, thank you. There's none that we're aware of at this time, and obviously we're working with them. We don't want to be in a position ever to close a school, so we're looking at all sorts of methods to keep those very school, particularly some schools in our villages, but we might change the options for them and what they offer in order to keep them open, because we know how vital they are to villages to have a school, because it offers so many other things that the community take part in as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? No, thank you. In which case, recommendations are at paragraph 3 of the report. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 12, back to Councillor Longley for the West Northamptonshire Postal Services procurement.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This has come before the Cabinet because of the scale of it, the size of it. It's a £4 million expenditure over 4 years, and if you read through the various options, it is pretty clear. Now, our current contract runs out in just under a year's time, so we have to sort something out, and this is the proposal that's on the table. £4 million over 4 years, and it's effectively a combo between more electronic devices and normal postage. So it's I think fairly straightforward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just the one speaker on this, Councillor Holland-Delamere.
Yeah, it's a good report. I welcome the fact that there's still consideration for those who don't use digital. But just in context of the digital, I'm aware as a former civil servant how sometimes when there was problems with the postal provider in terms of batching, submission for printing, and then the timescales of letters actually being received by the actual residents. That sometimes that created problems. So this is I used to work in debt management, and in particular about short timescales that we have sometimes with council tax debts. The failure of sometimes of our postal providers to actually deliver the actual post in the timescales that we want for the short timescales to escalate the process, then creates a problem for the people receiving those demand letters, which basically means it's like, how can you respond to something 7 days after the deadline? So one thing is basically making sure that when we do talk to the providers, that we are very clear about their approach to batching and distribution of the letters. And also that when we do find out what their batching terms are, that we communicate that to the staff so that those delays can be factored in, because when we have got tight timeframes, especially when it comes to debt management, we are basically creating problems for some of the most vulnerable people in our communities, which will have to be picked up by other parts of us, like the call centres. And when you get a debt collector turn up at your door saying, we want your money, when actually there's a letter that hasn't even been delivered yet because we haven't actually distributed the relevant letter in the timescales. I'm happy to come back to you afterwards to just highlight these things and talk to them a bit more, but it's one thing that we do need to take into account when considering who's applying for the contract, because there are real world consequences with those failures.
Well, thanks for that, Keith. And I have the very man with us tonight who's going to tell you all about how he's going to handle that. Stuart, may I turn to you?
The Director of Place Services.
Thanks, Chair. I think the best way to handle it is to meet up with Keith and make sure that your concerns are built into the procurement. And when we go out to procure, that is something we'll ask the contractors to respond to and make sure that we do get it right. So happy to pick up, Chair, after the meeting with Keith and make sure that we fully understand that. Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, then I direct members' attention to the recommendations. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Golby has item 13. It's the final proposal for the partnership agreement to deliver a new service model for 0 to 19 health visiting and school nursing service, including proposed changes to the service specification.
Thank you, Leader. So I just want to start by saying I think this is quite a landmark point in time for the way we work with our health partners. And I just wanted to welcome David Williams and Louisa Russell, who are sitting at the back. David is the Director of NHFT, and Louisa is going to come and work across both health and the council, you know, in the real spirit of integration to help make this work and oversee it. So I'm really pleased to present this to Cabinet, which is the partnership agreement between West Northamptonshire Council and Northamptonshire Healthcare Foundation Trust for the delivery of a new 0 to 19 health visiting and school nursing service model from the 1st of April 2025, with proposed changes to the service specification. The report seeks approval to enter into the partnership agreement, including the new service model and the refreshed service specification for the service. So in summary, the 0 to 19 services, the Healthy Child Programme, is a local authority mandated programme that includes key mandated health checks for children and young people and their families. The 0 to 19 services are currently delivered locally by the Northamptonshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust, NHFT, as a county-wide offer for children, young people and families living in North and West Northamptonshire. So from the 1st of April this year, the 0 to 19 services will be delivered across West Northamptonshire Council area through a Section 75 partnership agreement between NHFT and WNC. The decision for this partnership was granted by Cabinet on the 7th of May last year. There was a broad consensus to develop and implement a new service model with the refreshed specifications that supports the West Northamptonshire Council ambition to ensure the best start in life for all children living in our area. And there's a need to transform the 0 to 19 services to align with WNC's strategic vision around early help, family hubs and services for children with special educational needs and disabilities to help achieve greater collaborative working across the system. In September last year, we Cabinet Public Health presented the new 0 to 19 service model and the proposed changes to the service specification. This Cabinet report sets out and seeks approval to enter into the partnership agreement with the proposed changes to the service model and the detailed outline of the service specification components across health visiting for the 0 to 5s, school nursing for the 5 to 11s, the young people health and wellbeing service for 11 plus, and the thriving families pathway. It will also give an initial review on the consultation feedback accompanied by a summary report. There has been a comprehensive equalities impact assessment carried out, and with regard to consultation, the Council have undertaken extensive consultation since 2023 with the health needs assessment for children and young people aged 0 to 19, a large survey that gathered more than 2,600 responses and several in-person workshops with children, young people and their families. The consultation has informed our decision to go into partnership agreement with NHFT and design the new service model for the 0 to 19 services. In addition to the previous consultation, we have carried out, as going back to November just last year, a number of consultation events to engage and gather insights from families about the new 0 to 19 services. And the consultation includes a survey of more than 280 responses, included focus groups with families that will be affected with the proposed changes to the current services. And I've got a full report detailing the consultation, which was overwhelmingly positive in support for the direction that we're taking this in. So, Chair, I just wanted to say that we've tracked the progress of this work over the last year. or so through Cabinet and scrutiny, and I'm very pleased and excited for the opportunity this new arrangement presents. Finally, I'd like to thank Rasha Fayed and her team for the excellent piece of work that she's done and kept us all informed as we've gone through this journey. And I've also made a point of welcoming Louisa to West Northants Council from NHFT to further integrate our joint oversight across this approach moving forward. There's a set of slides for further information at the back of the report, and I'm very happy to recommend the report to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Golby. We've got two speakers on this, Councillors Squires and Randall.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I like the report. I like the slides. Everything look very good. Just a question from reading the slides. Well, in fact, I've got two questions. Is this an actual improvement in our services, a cut, or just a replacement, i.e. the status quo? And the second question was around monitoring. It mentions the ASQs on page 489. Do we measure local outcomes, set target and measure effectiveness? And the reason I want to ask that is we talk about productivity. Money well spent here will save us money later on. Are we actually measuring the effectiveness of this programme? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Randall.
Yeah, mine are very similar actually. So it was how will the outcomes be measured? And where will these services run from? Are they going to be running from the family hubs? You know, and how you're working? I assume, you know, with the services that you'll be working closely with schools, police and every other organisation. But yeah, you know, where? Because we've got to have somewhere to access these services. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, it's certainly not a cut, and these services have been totally redesigned based on the experience from the last agreement we have with NHFT. So hopefully we've designed them exactly for what we need moving forward based on what we know and the evidence. We will be working in the hubs all through our laps, but perhaps if I could ask Sally to just elaborate a little on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Golby. So just to Councillor Squires, so as Councillor Golby said, the new service specification, it's very much about meeting the needs of our young people in West Northamptonshire. So definitely an improvement, definitely a focus. And obviously we've done an awful lot of work in preparation, benchmarking, working with the services, working with families. So you know, very much an improvement. We do have a number of mandated indicators that we have to measure. You know, they're set out in the report. We will also have, you know, we've also got sort of local indicators. And a key thing as well is understanding those indicators across different communities. So it's not just about the indicators themselves, but it's looking at different communities and making sure we've not got anyone excluded and things. So I'm very happy to, you know, speak further out of the meeting about that. Similar to Councillor Randall's questions, the service will be delivered out of the family hubs. That's the key, really. It's about joining all the offers together. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any final comments, Councillor Golby?
No, thank you, Leader.
Councillor Baker.
I just wanted to reiterate what people have already said really about, we've already done a lot of work with our colleagues from health, and we're really looking forward to actually being a joined up service. So we actually see each other and we can say what we think we need and what they can tell us what they need. So it's going to work really well. As I said earlier, the first one will be opening at the end of this month in our hub downstairs with our health colleagues in the building with us. So we will work very closely together, and we do have plans for the other hubs. I've spoken about various places today, so we will be announcing those very shortly, and then we will be going out in spokes in some of the smaller areas. So we will cover the whole of West Northants in the very short term with these family hubs, so that everybody has got a local access to these services that they need, And this will really change our early help offer for families. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Herring.
When we brought the recommendations from the Tuscan Finish group from the Health Scrutiny Committee to Cabinet, one of the recommendations was for a school nurse to be available to all of the secondary school. In the report, it only mentions the school nurse being available in the teen clinic and being based in the locality, but it didn't really mention how large that locality is going to be. So I do hope that that original recommendation will be borne in mind when this report gets implemented. Thank you.
I think the Director of Public Health may be able to respond to that.
Joe, if I could maybe bring Louisa in to help me with this, but basically as we develop the offer, what we will see is a sort of much stronger partnership of the different professionals. Louisa, would you be able to just help me with the detail of that?
Firstly, thank you for the welcome and for the invite to come and contribute to the discussion. I think just picking up on some of the earlier comments, we do really see this as an improved service, and I think it's a shift in focus. So I think this is taking health visiting school nursing back to its roots of prevention, early intervention. And I think over the years, there's been drift from that because there've been the pressures. And I think the service redesign really takes it back to that, which completely aligns with all the other pieces of strategy that we the early help, the family hub. So I think it absolutely will strengthen and improve the offer and completely shift the focus to where it should be in true public health. How will we monitor? There was a question about that earlier on, and I think we've absolutely thought about that in the development of the Section 75. So there is a section, an appendix within the Section 75 that talks about how we want to develop a locally based outcomes framework so that we could look back in however many years and say, did we do the right thing? Did we improve the outcomes for children and families? So we've made a start on that already because we're looking at an outcomes framework that will look at national measures, local measures, but also measures based on what children and families tell us, what's made a difference for them. So we're building our own outcomes framework as part of the new model, and that's already in development and quite exciting that we'll be able to build that and have all the reporting structures that will feed into that. So we absolutely will be able to monitor the effectiveness of the new model. The bit specifically about school nursing, so we are absolutely looking at a kind of blended approach for school nursing in partnership with everybody that's already working with young people. So I think the shift in the focus in the model is not that school nurses will work here and the youth offer will work here and it's all fragmented. I think what we're looking to do is school nurses using their unique skills as specialist public health nurses to lead the clinical elements of the service that need a clinical intervention and clinical oversight, but working much more in partnership with the emerging youth offer and other people, local communities, the work in the labs to really bring together that specific offer that teenagers need, which we think is quite different to what younger children need, different types of needs, and they access services in different ways. So the teen clinic absolutely won't be the only place and way they can access a school nurse, but it is an excellent example of a partnership approach to young people being able to access a multiple range of professionals all in one-stop shop. So we think that the teen clinic approach is something that could be replicated in other areas, but it won't be replacing school nurses in schools.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Herring?
Yeah, your last thing just confused me about won't be replacing school nurses in schools, because I do one of the things that came up was to have somebody, and I understand it may not have to be a clinically trained school nurse, but they did want a sort of mental health first aider, somebody who was trained to be able to deal with situations as they arose within, and they're big communities, our secondary schools, often over 1,000 pupils, and they really do need that input, not just at some locality somewhere that they can contact. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and I think that the the partnership as it grows. So if we think about mental health in schools teams that are quite new and developing and spreading across different parts of West Northamptonshire, I think it's when we work in partnership with all those different pieces of the system that schools will get that. So I think we need to see it differently, that it isn't just school nursing, it's about a whole system response to make sure schools have got what they need for their young people.
Any further, so Chief Executive, did you want to come in?
Sorry, it's just a detailed point for those that don't know, just in case you wondered, Section 75 is a legal contract that you typically have between a local authority and a health partner, just in case you wondered what that was referring to. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Louisa, David, thank you ever so much for attending this evening. Really appreciate it, and for all your hard work on this really important piece of work. Thank you. There's just a single recommendation at paragraph 3 of the report. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 14 is with Councillor Hallam. It's the contract procurement for the Council's salary sacrifice car benefit scheme.
Thank you, Leader. This is to start a procurement process. We have one of these schemes in place at the moment. That's coming to the end of the contract term. It's worth saying that the scheme actually costs the council nothing, so there's no budget impact. It's only benefits to employees. And what the scheme does is effectively it means that employees can salary sacrifice and make a saving on tax and national insurance, and at the same time effectively have access to what is a fleet of electric vehicles to choose from. The schemes work really, really well for employers. I know myself, I actually have a leased vehicle from my own employer, and the scheme works really, really well. It's really easy to use, no cost on the employer, all the benefits on the employee, and an encouragement to get electric vehicles out there. What's not to like? Happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Hallam. Two speakers, Councillors Squires and Randall. Thank you, Councillor Squires. Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've just got one question, because obviously the amount is taken direct from the salary. What happens if somebody leaves or somebody's made redundant, or, you know, and then they can't find another job? What is that lease with that person and it carries on with them? You know, what happens in that scenario?
So I can speak from my own experience, and I'm sure the other schemes are the same. The schemes have have like a almost like an insurance policy of included within it. Don't take that as insurance. That's probably the wrong way of describing it. But there's a mechanism if people move on to another employer, and circumstances change. There are mechanisms within there.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? No, fairly straightforward paper and a good benefit to be able to offer to council staff. Recommendation is at paragraph 3 of the report. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 15 is with Councillor Rebecca Breeze. It's the award of contracts for the treatment of residual waste and household waste recycling centre services.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of the report is to inform colleagues of Cabinet about the outcome of procurement of replacement contracts for 3 of our waste services. These contracts are, firstly, a contract to treat residual waste from 1st of April 2025, a contract to provide the household waste recycling centre services from 1st of April 2025, and a contract for the waste transfer facility where dry mixed recyclables collected in the south area will be delivered before being taken for sorting, which actually commenced in 2024. I would like to take this opportunity actually to thank Scrutiny for their work and the contributions that many residents made in the development of the waste strategy, which was agreed in November 2023. This important work identified the key outcomes and opportunities which are now included in these contracts. This document will continue to inform the blueprint for how we deal with our waste both now and into the future, and will also be particularly relevant when our existing waste contracts come to a conclusion in 2028. In October 2023, Cabinet agreed to commence the procurement of these contracts, and although decisions have been taken under delegated authority, they have been taken in consultation with me as Cabinet member with responsibility for waste services. The procurement processes have been overseen by expert legal and procurement advisors to ensure the procurements are compliant. But this process is now complete, and we have successfully secured good value contracts, which will also increase the amount of waste that is reused, recycled and treated. So the first of these contracts is the new contractor for the residual waste treatment contract. That will be Thalia. And at this point, I would like to make it clear that this contract is not for the collection of residual waste curbside, but for the treatment of that residual waste after it has been collected. The new contractor has committed to treat at least 95% of residual waste, and they will also recover waste for recycling and use local treatment facilities. There's no minimum tonnage or composition guarantees within this new contract, so there will not be any restriction on the flexibility of the authority to recycle as much as we can. The contractor who has secured the second contract to manage our 6 household waste recycling centres is FCC, who is also the incumbent contractor. From the 1st of April, sites will be open 7 days a week from 10 until 6, offering an improved service for residents. And the contractor will also recycle a minimum of 60% of the waste and increase the emphasis on recovering reusable materials for resale, either at Farthinghoe or a new reuse shop, which will be located at Sixfields in Northampton. This new contract will enable a step change in the amount of material collected at the household waste recycling centres that is recycled and with improved quality of services. So I'll reiterate again, these contracts are not for the collection of waste or recycling from the curbside, and residents' collection services are not going to change. There's been absolutely no decision to change the bin collection arrangements, and if there were, we would have included the public in any decision-making through an extensive consultation process before any such decision was made. So in conclusion, I believe these new contracts are best value and will achieve good outcomes for this authority. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Breeze. We've got 2 speakers on this particular item, Councillors Harris and Randall.
Thank you. There must be an election brewing in the air. Councillor Brown, I just have to come back on a point you made earlier, if I may, because context is everything. The lovely soundbite that you made about the Lib Dem Council, the 25% tax rise. It's always important to have context that, you know, prior to 2023, there was 15 years worth of Conservative-led council, which had a lovely habit of freezing and cutting council tax. So chickens come home to roost. I
could have chosen Somerset as well.
You could have chosen plenty. I could have chosen Woking. There are plenty to talk about. On to the point in hand, if I may. This is really just a plea. This is good news. I'm pleased to hear about these contracts for the waste recycling, particularly the hours. I think that's a really good news story for us. It's been talked about for a number of years. What I particularly am keen to see is whether that has a positive impact on fly tipping. We know that that's a real blight, not just in rural areas, in our towns too. So I think we should take a really keen interest to see whether extended hours has a positive effect on that and monitor it very, very closely. I hope it does. I suspect it may not, but let's look at it closely. My particular plea is that there are still plenty of other really hard to recycle things out there. Things like toothpaste tubes, medical blister packs, to name a few. The list is endless, really. And to big up one of the villages in my area, Welford, I think I've mentioned Welford in the past, have been really pioneering at trying to collect this waste for themselves and go through the recycling processes independently, because that's the only way that they can do it at the moment. And that's got more and more difficult in terms of having to take it to different locations, which seems to keep getting farther and farther away. So my plea really is that I hope we can start to look at how we might be able to take, even if we can't do anything physically with it, at least we could be a holding place for some of these things, and maybe people like TerraCycle or whoever can then maybe collect from us locally. I've got at least 2 other villages that are really keen to try and start collecting these items in. It's not that cost effective necessarily to do it independently, but if we could maybe explore the options of being able to take stuff to household waste recycling centres, I think it would encourage others to do more of the same. Thank you.
Councillor Vandal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, welcome that tips are open 7 days a week, because, you know, that has caused, I'm sure, a lot of fly tipping. 10 till 4, it'd be interesting to see how that works. Obviously, that will probably restrict quite a lot of people during the week. Hopefully, they won't have to wait too long when it comes to a booking service of a weekend, because what we don't want to see is people having to wait 3 weeks or something before they can get a weekend booking. What we do see a lot in the rural areas is the dumping of trade waste. And I wondered if there was any way we could look at having, you know, somewhere for traders to come to dispose of their waste, even if it was a small fee, because it must cost us a phenomenal amount of money to keep going out across the rural areas and collect all this. And then we've still got to dispose of it as well. So I just wondered if there's, you know, if there'd been any work around that.
Thank you. Councillor Breeze.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you, for your support for these 2 contracts. You both touched on fly tipping, which I absolutely abhor and is absolutely top of my agenda. And when we are considering with officers, we're looking elsewhere at best practice at how we can educate the public and deal with this menace. I think it's a horrible practice. It seems to be on the increase around the country, and I want to work with the community and officers to stamp it out and make it absolutely socially abhorrent activity. So that really is a #1 priority for me. One thing that these contracts don't do is constrain our activities in terms of recycling. So I hope over the next few years and in the lifetime of these contracts, we will be able to expand the recycling. And you are absolutely right. There are other areas that we could look at with the contractors. And it was important to me that, and officers, that this did not constrain us, and it doesn't. So look at other things. Councillor Randall, on trade waste, the household waste recycling centres do take trade waste. There is a facility for managing that for a fee. Looking at how we can expand that, that's not particularly something that's come into this, but it is something that is also important in terms of reducing what happens outside in the community. I agree. Does that answer your question?
I thought it was limited, you know, things like vans, they can only go in at so many times a year. That is the thing. And if you're a trader, you might be filling up your van or taking out a kitchen once a week or something.
Yeah.
Good.
Technical answer.
Sorry, I think we need to be clear that the dumping of trade waste is usually because of criminal elements. It's not because of facility. There are plenty of facilities for large, small, medium companies to understand their waste and dispose of that waste properly. What you do get is, and we've seen it all of the time, is people who knock on doors suggesting that they will do that properly and then get the money and then just dump for maximum profit. So again, let's be clear. I think the vast majority of commercial waste that is tipped within our countryside isn't because of lack of service or lack of opportunity. It is purely a criminal intent. Sorry, and I use that word carefully. But that's what we really need to stamp down on. And Councillor Breeze has already identified that her #1 priority, which officers are now looking at, is how, not just in our urban areas, but our countryside as well, we can be more effective in stopping that practice and catching the perpetrators who are blighting our countryside. And it's not just a West Northants issue. I think it is a countrywide issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? No, I think I'll just highlight once again, because it's worth repeating, just the achievement and the benefit of having those household waste recycling centres open 7 days a week once the new contract kicks in. I'm sure that will be appreciated by residents across the district, and it will make a huge difference. One more comment?
You just reminded me of a point I was going to make to Councillor Randall, which is that most of the activity takes place between the hours that we've identified as being the optimum opening hours, and by opening them 7 days a week rather than having it spread out over 4 when you have fewer visitors over those extra hours. I think this will be far more efficient and practical use of resource.
Well said. Recommendations are at paragraph 3 as ever. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you. The penultimate item on the agenda is item 16 with Councillor Longley again. It's the budget for the demolition of non-functional buildings. Councillor Longley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to think that the report is very straightforward. There are 5 buildings or facilities in case, and you'll all have a view on them. The primary reason is that we haven't got a use for the facilities as they stand. We may well have some thoughts on what the site itself could be used for, but it's costing us money to upkeep them and security and such like, and we get a lot of vandalism and entries and so on and so forth. So the conclusion is, and they're all in pretty poor state of repair, so the conclusion has been to knock them all down, knock these 5 down, and use the sites or sell them, one or the other, but probably in most cases use the sites for some other activity. And you'll all have views on that, and I know I'm going to hear from Wendy on Evelyn Wright for sure, but and be pleased to do so. So that's about the size of it. The budget is about £1 million, and it's identified on page 520. I think that's about the size of it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 3 speakers on this one, Councillors Harris, Holland Delamere and Randall.
Chair, the principle of this, no issue at all. I can understand the logic for doing so. I think it's the $1 million question that I have, of course, is what happens next. That's the big question for me. There's clearly challenges we've already discussed this evening in terms of delivery of housing. I would hope that that's in the mix for discussion. Clearly, not all of these sites are going to be appropriate for that, but some of them may well be. And that's probably not a question that you can answer tonight. I appreciate that, but it's a question that needs to be asked. Particularly interested in the Evelyn Wright site, given that there is a legacy history of use and requirement in terms of how that was gifted to the council, if that's my understanding is correct. So I'd specifically like to know what that looks like, because that sounds like that's the only building that has got a legacy requirement for use, if I can put it that way. So I'd be interested to know if you can answer that one. If you can answer the other points about future use of the sites, that would be great. But I hope that we can at least be looking at some of them for our use for social housing, at least. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jonathan. Well, you can be in no doubt that we'll be looking at how we can add to our activities in what I've been banging on about a bit earlier on this evening. So there's no doubt about that. And each one will have a story, and any inputs are always gratefully received. You know, it's there's no closed minds on these at all, and it's this is a tidy up situation, getting ready to utilise the sites, assuming that we can, and I think in most cases we can, or something more productive, or that suits the agenda that we've been talking about most of the evening, I think.
I'd just add on Evelyn Wright. It's one of the buildings on this paper that where actually there is a firm proposal for its future use, and I suspect it's because of that covenant that you mentioned, Councillor Harris. I'll just quote from paragraph 5.4 of the report. Following evaluation of options, it's proposed to build accommodation for children and young people in care on the site, alongside some social housing. Some of the social housing is proposed to be designated for young people leaving care, helping them make the transition to adult life as the council fulfils its role as corporate parent. So I would hope that meets the needs of the covenant put in place. I can't guarantee that at this point, but I'm sure it will have been taken into account. So we'll move on now to Keith, who's already in his place.
Just basically a quick note to note that, of course, Ecton Brook Care Home was previously on the list to be covered by this fund, and I welcome the fact that it's still covered by the government's Brownfield Land Release Fund. So that's really good to see that coming down under another budget.
It is in the case, yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you, Keith. I know that you and Councillor Hill in particular have worked very hard on that. Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I'm really pleased to see that Evelyn Wright was no longer going to be sold, and it is now going to be turned into a wonderful, needed provision. I've followed Evelyn Wright right from the time when it was due to be closed, campaigned, petitioned and everything else, because as we know, it was gifted by Evelyn Wright for the care of people of Daventry. So, it's really close to my heart, that one. So, I'm really pleased that, it's going to be put to good use. The only thing that concerns me actually is, to give Martin a 2 million budget to do the same to similar buildings without the need for cabinet approval. What is this list? Where are these buildings? How will this be communicated with local people and councillors? So is there a list that we can see? And the only other thing is if they are derelict buildings, going back to the Evelyn Wright, for 7 years, we have had that building stood empty, costing us huge amounts of money, having people patrolling it all the time. And as you've said, there's been 60 vandalism attacks. We don't want to keep paying out for another 7 years on other buildings. If we're not going to use them, let's make them safe and demolish them now. But it would be good to know where they are. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Wendy. Well, I take you back to whenever it was, a year ago, was it? It's 9 months ago when you and I went out and had a look at the site, and I think we went through that very conversation then, and that's what we're going to get. So it's any input that is always well received, especially local stuff. Because but Simon was dealing with this. I mean, Simon knows Daventry as well as most, I'd say, and so I don't think there'll be any problem there. As regards the additional, do you want to pick this up, Stuart, for the others? Yeah.
Yeah, over to the Exec Director for Place.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's on the basis of what you were saying there, Wendy, in terms of there are a number of buildings that we are looking at, which relates back to the previous budgets that we were talking about. How do we reduce the costs in the Children's Trust? Part of that is by making sure we provide the most appropriate buildings, etc. We're working with our adults, our children's, our right across the board, our housing colleagues in looking at a whole range of sites at the moment. Now, at the moment, we don't know whether that some of those buildings may be refurb or they may be demolition. But as soon as we've made those decisions of what is the most viable use going forward, then with the delegations we've got, then we can action that as quickly as possible. So there are a range of buildings that I'm more than happy to sit down with members and identify. At the moment, we don't know which ones are there for demolition, which ones are refurbishment, etc. But we know by having a budget that we can escalate that and move it forward more quickly in the process. So it's all about speed and getting on with the job as quickly as possible. But most, if not all, are in that to produce the sort of impacts that we're seeing on Evelyn Wright.
And I think the final concern that you raised, Wendy, was just about the identification of further buildings for demolition. I think if you take all of the recommendations together and 3.1.3b, it does then bring in the Cabinet Member for Finance to give approval for further buildings that are identified. So there is that democratic accountability. It wouldn't necessarily result in a paper coming back to Cabinet, but it would go to presumably EPB, Executive Programme Board, where the full Cabinet and Executive Leadership team come together for discussion. And at that point, I would hope that ward members would be informed of any plans at that point in time. So all that said, the recommendations are at paragraph 3. Is Cabinet agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Final paper of the night, and thank you to Councillor Longley for his marathon stint tonight. He can have a little rest now. So it's over to Councillor Lister for St James Depot and the appointment of the contractor for remedial works and delivery strategy.
Thank you, Chair. So this is seeking approval for 2 items. This is to appoint a contractor for the remedial works of the St James Depot site and to approve our recommended delivery strategy for delivering high quality housing on the site. So as we know, St James Depot is a former bus and tram depot and was acquired by us in November 2023. We've secured 1.368 million from the government's Brownfield Release Fund to address the site challenges that we have. It includes the cost of the project includes adequate contingency, optimism bias, and we have no anticipated pressures on WNC finances. We're also working to ensure the development partner procurement will deliver a scheme that doesn't require additional council funding. The remediation works that are in the report include the asbestos removal across the site, the internal strip out, and partial demolition of the structures. We're currently evaluating tenders from the contractors with an award expected in the second week of March 2025. It's important to note we must have the contract signed by March 31st, 2025 to secure the Brownfield Land Release Fund grant. Our vision for the site includes 91 new homes mixing 1 and 3 bedroom properties with potential retention of the original tram facades to create tram shed terraces. The development will also feature new public realm and improved access to Sharman Lake. For the development partner procurement, we're recommending an open procurement process which has been positively received during soft market testing. This will be a 2-stage process allowing developers to demonstrate their experience and present their vision for the site. Milestones upcoming, including the appointment of the contractor, the remediation work beginning autumn 2025, expecting to last 12 months, the development partner procurement starting this spring, and target to sign the development agreement by summer 2026. Without this intervention, the site would likely remain derelict due to significant viability challenges. The project aims to transform this brownfield site into much needed housing while preserving local heritage where viable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lister. We've got 3 speakers. It's Councillors Harris, Purser and Randall. The appendix to this item is on pink papers. So just need to ask Jonathan, Bob and Wendy, do any of you need to refer to the appendix? Because I'd need to move to closed session if you do. You haven't got those? Okay. Okay. Jonathan, do you need to refer to the appendix? No. Bob? No. Okay, we'll remain in public session then. I'll leave that for the Labour group to sort out. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. On a positive note, it's good to see this project moving forward. I guess there's a couple of questions that I have really. We've touched on and mentioned the heritage. I know that there's been representations made by people on that front, and it's really just to seek assurances that we are going to do as much as we can to retain the heritage element of it. The comment was made, Councillor Lister, you talked about no additional funding required, and I just wanted to, I guess, seek some assurances. We've had a number of redevelopment projects in the town where we've had to do additional funding or we've contributed further funding subsequently. So I just wanted to seek some assurances that that isn't going to be the case. We're not going to be faced by another one where we start and embark on a project and then before we know it, we're looking at more contribution. I know that might be difficult given the state of industry and redevelopment and so on, but I guess if that situation arises, perhaps the assurance should be that we hear about it and obviously we get to comment on that. There was obviously originally a lot of discussion about social housing again, and I know we've started to blur the lines between social and affordable. I still see them as 2 very different things. And I heard you use the phrase high quality housing. So I'm hoping that we get some really good high quality social housing from this particular development. So again, assurances on that would be helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Purser. Okay, thank you. Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you. Going back to when we put out a press release, really. There's a paragraph. WNC is engaged with churches to agree on the purchase of the building and is now looking at the future viability of the site through a feasibility study to ensure that any future development meets the needs of our residents and while maintaining the historic character of this landmark. But then on 5.5, it does say if it doesn't stack up in terms of viability, then the facades may need to be removed. Now, obviously, I don't know what it said in the feasibility study way back then, but it is a historic site, and local people are very passionate about that building. So really, what I want to know is, what did the feasibility study show when we did that, and what are the chances of it not stacking up?
Back to you, Councillor Lister.
Thank you. On the heritage, we can cover that one off. I met with Graham Croucher, who's the Save the Tram Depot chap, and I gave him my assurances that I would very much like to retain the heritage, the frontage of the sites, the rear of the sites, and now through the development process, also we're having the open market procurement there, which allows us to see the development come forward and what they're offering. That's one of my key parts. I'm very interested in the heritage, and I think it's part that we should retain. It's history of the town, as you say, and it's quite right that we aim to retain it, which is why we're doing the remedial works as we are doing now, to ensure, it's more expensive to do them this way, but retain the frontages rather than just bulldozing the building, because we do want to retain those. And some of the developers I know the team have mentioned, have looked at various different things that they could do with the frontages to incorporate them into the building. No additional funding. Well, we know that we've had Brownfield Land Release Fund. As we say, we anticipate no additional funding from a council perspective, and we'll obviously work with the developers. That works on the viability. It goes on to the, what do you want to do? If you want to retain the frontages, do you put more housing on the site? Do you do less? That's how we work through the development process, and deliver that. And same on affordable housing. We're not talking social, we can't guarantee. We talk about affordable housing in the report as well, but that has to be looked at as the wider picture around the viability of the site in terms of the greater picture as to what we want to do, and we have to see those options come forward and make that decision as we go as a group, really, because it's a case of the site come forward and say, do we knock the front down? What do we do to make this site as attractive as possible, but delivers for our residents? I'm not sure if you want to add anything else, Stuart. You look like you're pensive.
Yeah. Over to the Executive Director for Place.
Thank you. Just to clarify the importance of the buildings, working with the community, it was put forward to English Heritage to make that independent judgment. They were very clear that the office, which we all knew and recognised, and I don't think has always been part of the plan to retain, that has now been listed. The other buildings, it was decided, weren't listable because they didn't have that national or significance attached to that. So again, as the Councillor Lister has identified, we will work with the developers to save as much of that history and incorporate as much of that history into the development as we go along. But equally, we've also heard from members that the aspiration is to create a fantastic place to live, as much affordable / social housing that we can possibly get on. And that's where the feasibility will start to, we'll have better information once we get into that development process. But just be assured, we will be absolutely retaining there's much in for that history, and in particular the listed elements has got a significant part to play in that development as we go forward as well. So it's a case of working with partners to understand that as we develop, as we get further in, as we understand the site. So I think I just repeated what you said, Councillor Lister.
It wouldn't be a council meeting if someone didn't say what had already been said. So, if there are no further questions or comments, sorry, Councillor Golby.
Yeah, I'll try not to repeat anything. I just wanted to say I totally support what we're trying to achieve here. It's a huge site, isn't it? 4.5 acres. And just to reiterate the bit around heritage, my grandfather was born in St James, and it's still important, the usage and the acknowledgement of what those areas represented to the local community. So I accept what's been said by Councillor Lister and Stuart. So yeah, really exciting, and you need to think about how many people pass that site every day, and the amount of people that come and visit to go and watch the Saints from out of town, from all of the countries. So it's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I remember the place well as a bus depot, and it's always been a site that I've looked at, and the architecture is impressive in many parts. So it's important that we retain that and stay true to the heritage of the town. A lot of these redevelopments that we see elsewhere in the country, they're at their best when they retain a nod to the past and the key elements that represent what the buildings used to be. So I'm really hopeful, and I think we're all adamant that we'll do everything possible to ensure that those elements are retained in this development. So if there's nothing more from anyone else, we'll move to the recommendations at paragraph 3. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Meeting closed.